And there we were, killing everybody left and right. And I don't know if I should say this. It's probably reflective of the fact that we did come out on different sides of this game. I like to think of this case. I like to think that there are better reasons than that. But Justice Breyer, I remember, thought that it was all really horrible, really just like disgusting. And
he upheld this. He voted to uphold the statute, and he was in dissent.
Repellent.
Yeah.
And I was like, next round, next round.
I don't even know what to say. I guess I could go on and on about how out of touch you are with gaming, or I guess I could just say thank you. But damn, either way, that's an image. A couple of weeks ago, at the Harvard School of Law, Supreme Court Justice Elena Kagan was interviewed by Dean Martha Minow. In that interview, she discussed her decision-making process for a case about video games.
Violent video games was constitutional. You asked the question, would this statute prohibit Mortal Kombat, a video game that you described as iconic? Justice Scalia interjected at that moment, and he said, I don't know what she's talking about.
In 2011, a California law banning the sale or rental of violent video games to minors was brought forward to the Supreme Court. The case was brought there by the Entertainment Merchants Association, or EMA for short. The law was brought before the Supreme Court in hopes that it could be overturned because video games are covered under the First Amendment. More specifically, they are covered under the freedom of speech as it applies to other art forms.
The argument's always the same. Video games cause harm, and the courts say, okay, if it causes harm, we may deal with it, but we need evidence of direct harm. And we need to see how violent video games actually create violence, and then the connection and the nexus is not found, and the courts say, well, we're not going to treat video games any differently than we treat movies or books. Censorship is a bad thing, but the courts have been good to video games over the years.
One game that was specifically called out in this case was Postal 2, which came out in 2003 by the company Running with Scissors. The briefing describes the game as having torturing images of young girls, setting them on fire and bashing their brains out with a shovel for no other reason than to accumulate more points in-game. In the interview, Kagan describes playing this game with Justice Stephen Breyer in his office.
Justice Breyer and I actually played the violent video game that was most involved in the case, and so he had it. He had his clerk set it up in his office, and I went over to his office and.
Now just fucking imagine that. Two people who have no idea how to play video games or even how to hold a fucking controller, playing one of the most violent and obscene games ever fucking made. It must have been like one of those My Mom Plays videos on fucking YouTube. Now, the Supreme Court did end up striking down the law with a 7-2 vote on June 27th, 2011. But this ruling has in no way stopped a flood of clickbait articles about how adult content in video games are destroying our children's brains. We still hear cries on our news for government regulations of the video game industry.
they start thinking in an aggressive way and they have more aggressive attitudes. That's not necessarily a link to violence, but that does tell us that the exposure, particularly for young kids, does have a negative effect in the way they think.
Growing up, my parents were never too strict about what kind of content I consumed. I remember watching Exorcist for the first time when I was fucking 10. Hell, one of the first video games I ever owned was Mortal Kombat 2 on the Sega Genesis. I had also rented plenty of games from our local video store that were rated M. To be honest, I never even paid attention to the fucking rating on the game. That was until Blood Rain had just come out, and I was dying to play this fucking game. And at the time, I had just turned 15, and one of my buddies had also just gotten his driver's license. So we got together and we drove 30 miles to the closest GameStop. I went and grabbed my copy of Blood Rain and took it up to the counter, and right there I was ID'd by some fucking douchebag employee. And of course, they would not sell me the game because I wasn't 17. I was so fucking pissed, but my buddy calmed me down and told me to just go ahead and buy this other game instead. And that other game was Morrowind, and to this very day I have no one else to thank for my love of Elder Scrolls games other than that dick at the register that denied me a much inferior game because, let's face it, Blood Rain kind of sucked. But that is besides the fucking point. The ESRB was created in 1994 as a direct response to congressional hearings over adult content in video games like Mortal Kombat 2 and Night Trap. Wait. Fucking Night Trap? Really? That shit was inappropriate?
Sarah, your parents are leaving. So, Sarah, we're in this huge house with all your friends. We have telephones, we have a car, your parents are gone, and you say so? Come on, Sarah, what's the first thing you think of? Party! Music!
Basically, because of the violent content in these games, Congress gave the video game industry an ultimatum.
You walk away with one thought today, that if you don't do something about it, we will.
So the Entertainment Software Rating Board was formed. This system emulates that of the Motion Picture Association of America, or MPAA, but instead of a G, PG, PG-13, R, or NC-17, we have EC, E, E10+, T, M, and AO. The ratings themselves include a brief description as to what we can expect from the game. In 2013, the International Rating Coalition, or IARC, I swear to God there's way too many fucking acronyms here, was formed as a way to streamline rating systems across multiple countries.
It's a simple one-step process. They complete an IARC questionnaire in a participating storefront's developer portal and immediately receive ratings from various territories around the world, which are then displayed next to their game or app.
The ESRB is part of this coalition now. This makes it even simpler for developers to get their games rated across most countries without much of a hassle. The dreaded AO rating is very similar to an NC-17 rating. It is the rating that you don't fucking want. It can keep your game from being sold at almost every retailer. Most major publishers like EA, Ubisoft, and Konami, will not publish a game that has an AO rating. An AO rating is handed out very rarely. It is even less common in major AAA releases. Games like Manhunt 2 and Leisure Suit Larry, Magnum Cum Laude, Uncut and Uncensored are about it for popular games on the list. Now, Grand Theft Auto San Andreas sort of made this list also.
You want to have some coffee?
When it was first released on PC, someone discovered a coding for a certain mini-game. This, of course, brought about the Hot Coffee mod. If you didn't know what this mod was, it basically opened up a mini-game that let you have sex with your in-game girlfriend. After the news came out about this, Rockstar immediately pulled the game off the shelves and issued a recall. And in a couple of days, when they re-released the game, they were sure to delete the hot coffee coding. This move allowed San Andreas to once again get an M rating. But if you look hard enough, you can still find it through the modding community. Recently, the AO rating has been brought to the public eye with the release of Hatred, a third-person shooter about a mass killer.
Nothing can stop my hatred. You cannot kill what breeds within you. Nothing can stop me. A fearless, remorseless genocide machine.
While the content of the game is disturbing, the obvious question as to why this game gets an AO rating, while games like GTA 5, which offers a much more interactive experience and allows you to commit the exact same crimes, is able to still have an M rating. A lot of people have been questioning whether the A rating is just or not. And they're also asking if the same type of corruption that exists in the MPAA, for example, is now moving its way over to gaming, where we have AAA developers getting a lot less scrutiny as compared to their indie counterparts. No matter what your belief is on the whole corruption issues when it comes to rating systems, the ESRB has been nothing but a godsend for parents. The system makes it very simple for them to decide what games are appropriate for their children. Me personally, unlike my parents, I do control what type of content my children are allowed to watch or play. I will not even let them watch a PG-13 movie that I have not seen myself before and given it my approval. I have personally never even thought about buying them a game that is rated higher than an E. Now, my children are pretty young still, and I assume I will become a lot more relaxed on this as they get older, but I personally don't think I will ever get to the point where I allow them to play games like Grand Theft Auto until they are at least in their teens. With that said, I still think it is important that I, as a parent, have this fucking decision. The California law was a very blatant violation of the First Amendment, and the decision by the Supreme Court was the correct one. Even despite how silly it is thinking of a couple of justices sitting around playing a game like fucking Postal 2.